Hi, Keith here with Rebel Civics. Today we're going to talk about National Police Week for 2023. It's May 10th through 17th. So today is the last day of Police Week. I've been seeing a lot of activity on Twitter about Police Week. So I'd like to take the closing day of Police Week and consider what the job of the police actually is. So what is the thin blue line and what does back the blue mean? We're joined today by TC. He's a former law enforcement officer, so he's a subject matter expert on this. He's also the originator, host, and show owner of Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. It's a show he started warning about the COOF measures and interviewing business owners about what was happening, what the government was doing in the lockdowns. His protesting and exposing the malfeasance against liberty and freedom as encapsulated in the Constitution, caused a bit of problem with his role as a sheriff deputy. His involvement in the protest and what some call dissident behavior led to conflict with his now former employee, the Olmsted County, Minnesota Sheriff's Office. But TC continues to produce content and call out tyranny and despotism in Minnesota. He covered the Lisa Hanson story extensively, an example of what the police and the government will do to somebody to prove a point, make an example of them. And he was on Rebel Civics last fall, exposing the police and government corruption surrounding that. So you can follow him on YouTube at Minnesota Black Robe Regiment and Twitter at Robe Regiment. So TC, welcome back to Rebel Civics.
Hey, thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate it.
Sure.
I want to clarify too. My role as a deputy with the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office here in Minnesota was not specifically oriented towards law enforcement as far as having a patrol or an investigatory position. I worked as a deputy inside of the detention center. I swore the same oath, had a massive amount of responsibilities as it came to supervising accused and convicted citizens. And I've always been constitutionally minded, and it was that career change for me, that changing into that career field relatively late in life, where I started to become aware of the problems that were taking place within the law enforcement.
So seeing that from the inside, formerly seeing that from the inside, and be willing to talk about it is what led you to now being on the outside. But I consider you a subject matter expert on this, and I've been following your tweets for Police Week, which is part of what triggered me to do this episode. So I'm glad you joined. The overall militarization of the police and what you see the police role really doing. I have this picture. I mean, this is what I use for the thumbnail. So this is kind of encapsulates the police in my mind when people say back the blue. Like, this is what I think of. Like, no, I don't back the blue. I know a few good cops. The ones that I know are all retired or left the force. But I imagine there's a few still in. I just haven't encountered them. But the majority of the police, this is more what they do. It's whatever they're told to do.
Yeah, that picture, I think a lot of people will see a picture like that and think that, well, that's, it's staged. It doesn't happen often. And, just to give an example, here in Minnesota, the DFL, the Minnesota version of the Democrats, the Democrat Farmer Labor Union or party, has proposed legislation to end no-knock warrants here in Minnesota, and you're seeing the party line breakdown. You're seeing, the right-wing conservatives, Republican types are just all up in arms. Pun not intended, but take it as you will. They're up in arms about the idea of ending no-knock warrants. And the Democrats, the leftists, are up in arms about the idea of not ending them, and they're both wrong. I agree with the Democrats wanting to you brought up militarization. wanting to take on and end no-knock warrants, but their reasoning for it is just, oh, it's disproportionately used against minorities, and BIPOC.
As soon as somebody brings up racism as a reason, you can stop
Yeah,
paying
they're off.
attention to them. They're off. They're
Right,
off. They're off
they're
base.
off.
Yes.
The other the other end of the spectrum is, oh, it's a vital tool that's meant predominantly to preserve evidence and to protect the lives of the police. Now, I don't think the cops in the world today, Minnesota or anywhere else, should be unduly placed in harm's way, but demonstrably, no knock warrants are not accomplishing what law enforcement in the United States claims it's enforcing or are accomplishing. And I believe they should be ended because I believe it's a constitutional issue. And neither party is addressing it from the proper perspective. And that speaks to, and I don't want to dive too deep into the subject matter right at the second, but that speaks to the entire point of what you're talking about with your program today.
Yeah, the
The
entire
constitutional issues.
concept that the police can break in violates the whole thing. And I understand the argument that there could be a case where evidence could be preserved, but the problem, as we see, is that once you allow the police to have that power, they're going to use it for far more than what was intended, to the point where what the initial claim was, which is preserve evidence, perhaps occasionally there's a case of danger to the police. Like, sure, I imagine that happens occasionally, but that's the rare exception for what we're seeing now, how no-knock warrants are used.
There's a phenomenal book for your audience to check out, and I don't know if you've checked it out yet, but Radley Balco wrote a book called The Rise of the Warrior Cop, and he released it in the early to mid 2000s, and then did a re-release of it. And in that book, he says so much of what I've been telling people for years. I just read it a couple of weeks ago. But I've been warning people about all of this for a couple of years, or more than a couple of years, probably for the last 10 years, I've been speaking about these issues and trying to get both ends of the political spectrum to meet in, for lack of better terminology, in a libertarian mindset of how do we address this, because it's either you hate the cops exclusively, that, the old, not the old, but the adage out there, all cops are bastards, that we're seeing, placarded everywhere. You either hate the cops 100% or you're 100% behind them. And that rigid black and white, very binary thinking is actually going to end up hurting us as a republic. And I believe it already has. And I think it has been doing so for a very long time. And I don't know what it's going to take to wake people up.
Well, I don't think National Police Week does, but to be fair, I do want to say what it is, since that's what I called the show. So here's the website, National Police Week. There's a bunch of events. People converge on Washington, D.C., the center of power, since I guess obviously this is about power. I don't know why they pick Washington, D.C. That's a federal thing. Police are supposed to be local. But anyway, that's where they meet. It's to honor, remembrance, pure support of those who gave their lives in the line of duty. Like, okay, all right, I'm not objecting to recognizing somebody that actually was killed in the line of duty, doing something that I would agree that they should be doing. I know that does happen. Often I look at where police are killed and I wonder why they were doing what they were doing and how they got themselves killed. But anyway, that's what the day is, or the week is. So it was 1962 it started. Interesting. I didn't know this till I looked at it, but it was JFK signed the proclamation that started it. They call it Peace Officers Memorial Day. If police officers actually did act as peace officers, I might be a back the blue guy, but that's not what I see. That's not my personal experience. That's not what I see all over the news and Twitter. And so conceptually, I understand the concept. It doesn't seem to be implemented that way. Anyway, that's what the event is. I'm not going to spend any more time on that. I just wanted people to know that is actually what the event is. I'm using this as an opportunity to talk about what the police are actually about, because this event does not cover what the police are about by any stretch of the imagination. So first off, the rule that I just want to make it clear, and you can back up with some of the data about this, but the job of the police is not to defend the people. They're under no obligation to defend the people in any manner. And even, not that I care that much about Supreme Court opinion, but the Supreme Court has weighed on this one and said, no, police are never obligated to defend anything. It's not their job.
That's correct. And I just had this conversation with an individual over Twitter, which of course, is always, a wonderful conversation when you converse with people on Twitter. But I had pointed something out at the Fraternal Brotherhood of Police or whatever, and somebody took great exception to what I was saying, and he kept going back to the oath, and I said, right, I believe they should stand on their oath, the oath to the Constitution, an oath to keep and defend the Constitution of the Republic of the United States is primary. And he goes, yeah, but the oath also includes safety and of the community, and he managed to find one that said something about and promote or protect quality of life. And that go ahead.
I was just going to say that the quality of life as defined by the government, like we ran out of wine last night. Like, is that the job of the police? What does quality of life really mean? That's
Correct.
a ridiculous role for the government to have, let alone the government enforcer who goes around with a gun and puts people in cages. So how do you use a gun and put people in cages to enforce quality of life? That makes no sense.
And that's exactly the problem, is that especially people who are, traditionally maybe on the right, Republicans, whatever, who are traditionally fully embedded and ensconced into the mindset of, back to blue at all costs. They don't think about the things that they're saying. They don't think about the reality and the implications of the position they're taking. And I brought up, in across the United States, you mentioned Lisa Hanson in the opening. Every single one of the executive orders that took place across the United States during COOF was done for quality of life. It was all done for quality of life.
That's the claim.
Quality. Well, right. But so the very people who are out there asserting that you have to back the cops because they take an oath not just to the Constitution, but for public safety and to promote the quality of life in their communities. But yet you turned around and protested the idea of the state being able to step in and tell you had to stay home, that you had to wear a facial covering, and that your small business had to be closed, while all the big box stores and corporations were allowed to stay open. You protested that. You had no right to protest that, and you had no right to call out the enforcement of it, because the cops were just doing what they were supposed to do according to their oath, and that was promote the quality of life of all people in the community. But yet when you point that out, and you point out that it was police that arrested people like Lisa Hanson, it was police, small town police that shut down small town, small businesses, and small businesses in big cities all over the United States that arrested a mother for playing in a park in Idaho with her children and other family. Arrested a mother who arrested in California a man who was paddleboarding on an empty beach in the ocean, arrested him. And it's on and on and on and on and on. When you point that out, they go, well, yeah, but that's not all of them. Well, where are the ones that spoke out against those things? Where are they?
The
And
within
if they
the
will, go ahead, Keith.
I was going to say, like, one of the ones that spoke out against it is you, and so now you can no longer have that role. And your role was not arresting people on the beach, working inside an incarceration facility.
It would have been dealing with the poor guy that got arrested for being on the beach, and now I got to sit here and go.
And my experience during that time with the police, I had several encounters with the police during that time. One was the police stopping me from going to the beach. I live in South Florida. I think, it's clear now vitamin D is a good idea. Fresh air, exercise, vitamin D. I happen to live in one of the least worst counties in Florida, which is one of the least worst states. But they closed our beach for a while. Like, why would you close the beach? Another time I was chased out of the park by a city police officer in Broward County, about an hour south of here, which is where Parkland is. So the cops there aren't particularly good. Anybody that remembers Parkland. We were told, it was me and my girlfriend and a friend, we had taken a bike ride and with a picnic lunch, and we're sitting in a park right by the sidewalk in a little grass strip between the sidewalk and the beach. The beach was closed because of COVID. We sat on the grass and we're having a little lunch in this park, and a cop came up and demanded that we stand up. We were allowed to stand there, but we weren't allowed to sit because of COVID. And so I started asking questions like, who told you to do this or why you're doing it? And he got belligerent and argued with me. And my girlfriend made me stop because we wanted to ride our bikes back home. But yeah, that was my encounter with the police.
Well, you were guilty of contempt of cop. That's what it was.
Contempt of cop. Like, I asked him why. Why is standing up okay, but sitting down isn't? And I was taking a break from a bike ride. I felt like sitting down. But no, that was against the rules. So that's just a really almost trivial, but it highlights what police will do. Their oath, you brought up the oath to quality of life. I didn't even know about that one. That's ridiculous, I think. They do take an oath to uphold the Constitution of the U.S. and of their state. That's actually the top oath.
Right. Yeah.
That oath would require them to not do this. Like, that's
exactly the thing. Anything that comes below that violates the top of that, it's a if this then that situation.
So do you believe it's possible? Do you believe it's possible to do the job of any law enforcement officer, particularly a city or town police, county police, and uphold the oath to support and defend the Constitution of your state and the U.S.?
Do I believe it's possible? Sure, absolutely. It's 100% possible.
Could you do that and not get fired?
In today's day and age, I don't believe that it's possible to do that within a average municipal police department. And the reason I draw the distinction is that the police department in and of itself is nothing but a waterfall of appointments, from the police commission to the chief of police to the deputy chief to the captains, lieutenants, to the sergeants on down. Everyone there is beholden to an appointment. The chief of police answers to a mayor, and often a mayor and a city council. And so if you have a left-leaning Gramscian Marxist style city council, which it's hard to find these days, even in small towns where they're not influenced by, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all sorts of other social justice type ideology. That's going to permeate your into your chief of police, because your chief of police is only going to be hired or kept around if he's willing to toe the line. And he or she will then also expect that same adherence from their staff. And so if you're of a mindset to stand on your oath to the Constitution of the United States and to the state that you live in, then you're not going to last long, because you're going to get told to do something. You know, let's bring up Albert Lee, Minnesota. During the Summer of Love, with the George Floyd death, which by the way was tragic, it shouldn't have happened. I have it on good authority from officers inside of the Albert Lee Police Department that Chief of Police, Director of Public Safety, J.D. Carlson, who was complicit in the prosecution of Lisa Hanson, in 2020 also ordered his officers on the day of a George Floyd protest in Albert Lee to kneel with the protesters in Albert Lee, Minnesota. Ordered them that when on scene, they would kneel. No choice.
Yeah, that's the time to say no. But I wouldn't last very long in that job.
No, and that's it. None of them did. They all did what they were told. They all did what they were told. And the sheriff of Freeborn County, former sheriff now, he retired, Kurt Freitag, ordered all of his deputies to not be anywhere near the protest during that, because he did not want his staff affiliated with that or associated with that.
And the difference there, that I think, go ahead, sorry to interrupt.
And that's what I was going to bring up, is the difference. And this is why I try to point out to people, I don't care if your sheriff's office in your community or your county says department, it's an office. And the distinction is that the sheriff is elected. He's elected by the people directly. And then the sheriff makes all of the appointments. And so if you have a constitutionally minded sheriff, you know, if you think to the work that Sheriff Mack did, and then there's now another sheriff in Arizona, not our, was it Joe Arpaio? I don't like him.
Not that one. Yes.
Not that one. But there's another sheriff in Arizona now who has very libertarian principles, who has said no continuously to the BATF and to the DEA and to the FBI and other federal organizations. And he's even said no to enforcing COOF protocols on staff and on the public. And he's even offered veterans returning from war that if you are given, if the ATF shows up or somebody shows up to you to take your weapons because you're a red flag level danger, you call my sheriff's office and I'll send my deputies out to defend you. Now,
from the ATF,
like that,
even, right? Yeah, from the ATF. They'll defend you from the ATF.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, are sheriffs like that frequently found across the United States? Not as much as I'd like to see, but they're far more common than chiefs of police. And they also happen to have surrounding them men and women who think the way that they do. They attract those people. And that's wonderful, but it's also a problem, because then they're attracting that style, that mindset, that kind of spine to them, which then weakens the, if you will, the bloodlines or the gene pool for hiring in other communities. And the sheriff can get away with it because they're elected directly by the people, but every sheriff's office budget is controlled by the county board or the county commission. And so if you have a county commission or a county board that is left of center or woke or whatever terminology you want to use, they can really crack down on what a sheriff can and cannot do by controlling the purse strings, and that can become a problem
Mhm.
for hiring, for training, for equipping, and it's it's a telling situation across the U.S. that when a county commission or board cracks down on a sheriff, can't fire him, can't remove him, but cracks down on him with the budget, more often than not, most sheriffs cave in.
But that highlight the key difference when we talk about the police and the sheriff, and I always try to uh, keep in mind that when I use the word. So police, city police, county police, state police, they report to the government directly. They're hired by the government. City police chief is hired by the government of the
That's right.
city. Sheriff is hired by the people, appointed by the people by election. So that is a key difference. But we to fix that problem, you have to change how their money is funded. So that problem could be fixed by privatizing the sheriff's department. But anyway, yeah, when I talk about police and sheriffs, I'll always distinguish them. Um, so yeah, that's a good background. I had a couple of examples I was going to bring up of police. Like it's so easy to find. You rattled off 4 or 5 of them, maybe more. But I thought I'd start with one you probably heard of. I happen to have just moved to Philadelphia after college when this one happened. This is a block in West Philly, not too far from where my girlfriend lived. Um, the Philadelphia police dropped a couple bombs from a helicopter
Yep.
on this house. Um, the problem, this is called Move, was the group, and they were causing some commotion. They resisted arrest, and they were charged with possession of firearms. I think they had some noise nuisances. Some of the neighbors complained that they had trash. Like I mean, that's what I remember. There was several move houses. One of them was a block from my girlfriend at the time, and we knew the house was there. And they were kind of junky, but this was West Philly. There was a lot of not all the houses were nice there. They weren't. If you would walk by and not notice that it was different from the others, they didn't actually firebomb the one that was a block away from my girlfriend. This one was, I think, about a mile away, right there where my mother grew up, by the way. Anyway, yeah, here's this story for people unfamiliar with it. TC, I guess you already know about it, but uh, this is the Move House, yeah, in Cobb's Creek for people who are familiar with Philadelphia.
Right.
They were, yeah. The problem was, here's they had arrest warrants, contempt of court, parole violations, illegal possession of firearms, and making terroristic threats. I don't know exactly what the threats were. Like, I think they told the cops to buzz off. Basically, that's probably about what that was. And I'm not really defending Move. They were definitely some jerks in that
Yeah,
community.
they were erratic. Yeah, they were
They were
radicals.
they
Yeah.
were a bit they were a bit excessive for where they lived in the city. If they moved out into the rural part of Pennsylvania, they might have actually been left alone. If they got far enough west and north in Pennsylvania at that time, they would have been fine, I think. But anyway, they were doing this in you know in West Philly, inside the city limits. Um, it resulted
Well, it
in
it just
they went after him. But what the police did, let me just finish the background, and then I'm going to let you go on this one. Um, they tried to arrest him, and the people said no. And what they were being arrested for, like you say, parole violation. How far would you push that? So what the police did is they evacuated the whole block, and they said that the residents would be able to return after 24 hours. They told everybody to leave their house, and then they tried to storm the building. The police were not, as it turns out, quite good enough to storm the building. Um, the people defended themselves, and like it was all over the news at the time. We were kind of glued to the TVs, uh, and so yeah, they had a little bit of trouble. So what the police did is they got a helicopter and they firebombed the buildings uh, and let the entire block burn. The fire department let the block burn, and I know around 10 people were killed. The move people, 5 of them were children, I think. 6 were children. Um, that's what they did. Anyway, that's what the police did. Police used 10,000 rounds of ammunition in an inner city, uh, in a crowded row house part of West Philly in the inner city. 10,000 rounds of ammunition and
So that's about half of what most gets used most every night in West Philly. So
South Philly. Yeah.
that's
But
how.
yeah, um, yes, one person, oh, 2 survives. Uh, they escaped. Anyway, that's the police, and like, yeah, no one was really charged. Or there's one example of the police. Go ahead. You want to chat about that one?
Well, there's really there's not much to say about it because what what we see with the move bombing is this this building escalation of militarization, military tactics by law enforcement, and it escalates even more so that by 6 years later, in 1991, look at how the law enforcement world, the career field, took on Ruby Ridge with the Weaver family,
Yeah, yeah,
and
that's an atrocity. That and that's the ATF and were involved in that. The police were all over that one too. The local
yep,
police, they
and
set up a war compound, right? Tent city with vehicles
yeah, oh yeah,
and
it was heavily militarized,
they thought they would.
and just a few years later, Waco, Texas, at Mount Carmel, um, they burned down a compound and killed nearly 80 people, many of them children,
That's the
for
biggest
nothing.
the biggest mass school murder in U.S. history. Waco,
Right.
Texas. FBI,
Yeah.
ATF, and the police. Um, all right, yeah,
And
there's that one. For people that don't know about that, that's something the police would do. Yeah, let's bomb a house for somebody that's parole violations and resisting arrest and possession of firearms. That was their crime. Here's another one, Breonna Taylor. So this one was a woman who had a former boyfriend who the police thought was involved in drugs, and maybe he was,
no,
and
he was.
he
The
was.
facts on the Breonna Taylor case are really clear. Her ex-boyfriend was a drug dealer, and they were executing the warrant against Breonna residents to get her ex-boyfriend.
Who was
But the
not
guy
there.
that she was with at the time had a perfectly clean criminal history. There was nothing on it. Brianna had nothing on her, and he was actually a licensed and permit to carry uh, holder. And this was not a knock and announce. This was a no knock warrant, and they showed up ostensibly looking for the ex boyfriend, even though he was already in custody. I believe it was the day before, and they still executed this warrant. And Brianna ended up dying because when they came through the doors, the boyfriend thought they were being raided by the ex-boyfriend and opened fire. And that's when the Louisville police opened fire, killing Brianna.
He and
And
the boyfriend fired a warning shot to let, and what he
yeah,
said, right? He thought he was letting what he thought was Brianna's former boyfriend know that, like, no, don't come in here. And they did it in the middle of the night to 2 people that had no criminal history, nonviolent. She
right,
was like emergency room technician, no criminal
EMT,
history, EMT, and I forgot his job, but he wasn't neither of them were involved in drugs at all. And what the police were
right,
saying as far as the warrant, it turned out that they lied in some of the parts of the warrant about their collusion with the post office, claiming that the post office said that there were suspicious packages. The former boyfriend had used that as an address, and he had a car. There was a car registered in her name parked in front of the boyfriend's house a few miles away. Like, that's the evidence. And it says here he shot a warning shot which hit one of the officers in the leg, and the officers fired 32 shots in return, much of it indiscriminate, shooting through sliding glass windows and doors, and they basically unloaded their
One
magazines in the
one
general
of the
portion of the
officers
noise.
actually stepped back and away and out and around to reposition himself to get even more shots through blindly firing through windows and walls. And a neighbor to Brianna's, I think it was either her own child or a nephew or a niece or something, was almost hit.
Yeah, there was
And
thin row house kind of buildings,
yeah,
and some of the rounds went through the walls into neighboring apartments in the middle of the night while people were sleeping.
yep.
And they killed Brianna. Uh, Seemed like a perfectly good person.
And no, and ultimately, really, no justice was actually ever done in this, in that
Yeah.
case.
They did charge him,
And
but I don't think that nothing ever happened with that, right?
that's really why it's so important that we start to talk about police reform. And there again, I'm not talking about defunding the police, but we do have to start talking about police reform. We have to end no-knock warrants. They have to go away. They're dangerous. They don't accomplish what anybody thinks they accomplish.
Mhm.
If you're worried that somebody has a bunch of coke or fentanyl or carfentanil or heroin or whatever the case might be, and you really want to get them for the possession of that, and we can have an entire different conversation and a completely different episode talking about the war on drugs in the United States. But
Yeah.
if that's what you want to talk about, is you got to preserve that evidence. If your goal is to end the sale of the drugs and the use of the drugs, isn't it mission accomplished if it gets flushed down the toilet? Really? I mean, mission
Good
accomplished,
point.
right? Mission accomplished. Who cares? Not to
Yeah.
mention
So
the
so
fact that when you're dealing with, ultimately, most of these no knock warrants are not being executed on knowingly violent people, provably violent people. They're being executed on peaceful sales individuals, drug dealers. People can say, well, they're drug dealers, they're scum of the earth. And we hear that all the time. I'm like, we still have supposedly conservative candidates out there campaigning saying that we should execute them in the streets. I've heard these things said. Uh, all that aside, there's absolutely no cause for a no knock warrant to ever be executed, because if your real danger is an exigent circumstance, police already have all the cause they need to enter a building in an exigent circumstance. They either have to have permission, a warrant with probable cause, or an exigent circumstance. And if you're pursuing somebody who has a firearm and they burst through the front door after they've already, shot at you in a traffic stop, you have all the exigent circumstances you need to go in after them. There's no such thing as an exigent circumstance to preserve evidence in that, as far as drugs or
uh
stolen property or anything like that. If you hear someone screaming inside for help, you have exigent circumstances. All that no knock warrants do is they create innocent victims. They create mayhem, and they get cops killed and wounded, and more importantly, they get private citizens who have done no harm to anyone else killed. And one of the worst cases I've seen of this, and Brianna's is bad enough, but if you look into the story of Duncan Lemp
Oh,
uh,
yes.
in Baltimore, his story, I mean, the family to this day still can't get any answers. The police will refuse to release any of the facts of the case, and we're going on 3 years, over 3 years now, of what happened with Duncan Lemp.
And
It's
you see the cases of no knock warrants executed on the wrong address and somebody being killed. There was a recent one, I don't remember the name, but somebody that answered the door in the middle of the night with a firearm because somebody pounded
Mm-hmm.
on his door. He had a firearm down position, and the cop opened fire and killed him. And it turned
Yeah.
out there was nothing.
I think
There was
that
no
was,
problem. They were either at the wrong house or I forget
yeah.
the details, but yeah, that kind of thing happens.
That just
Uh,
happened recently, and they gunned the
yeah.
guy down, and their answer, and everybody's out there going, well, he should have known it was the cops. Well, you don't come beating on my door at 2 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the morning and expect that I'm going to be alert enough to understand. Now, there's an argument to be made for, well, if you're not that alert, maybe you shouldn't be grabbing your gun either. But you don't know who's coming into your house or trying to come into your house,
Don't open the
and
door.
or don't open the door. But in the case that just happened recently, uh, the cops gunned down the man, and the wife still doesn't know who it is, so she picks up the gun and returns fire,
Oh,
and she got charged.
and if an ordinary citizen banged on someone's door at 2 in the morning with the gun, and the person opened up the door with a gun in the hand, and so they shot him, you'd be in jail for murder. Like, there's no question. It's not even a question. So,
Right.
and the police don't have any special thing. All right, I had one. Actually, I guess I got two more here. This one, Eric Gardner, probably know this story. I
Hmm.
watched this video again, and I was going to play it. And I decided not to play it. It's horrible. Eric
Yeah,
Gardner is
I don't,
standing on
I
the
can't. Yeah.
street, and who knows? I might get my show pulled from YouTube if I show what the police did. Eric Gardner standing on the street. He had been selling Lucy cigarettes, which they were harassing him for that. But on the day he actually got killed, I mean, the guy in this report says he stopped a fight between two street punks, and the cops came up and started yelling about selling cigarettes. He says he wasn't selling anything. He said he stopped selling them, and he just says, "Leave me alone." They end up choking him to death.
Right.
Um,
And there again, what's the crime?
he sold
Who's
cigarettes without paying the sales tax on a previous day.
well, who's the criminal there, and who's the victim? Like, who's the victim in this situation? And that's what we have to come back to, understanding the rise of this fascistic uh, police state that we're seeing rise up. Is more often than not, these laws, these codes, these statutes that are being enforced by armed men and women with the authority of the state, with a monopoly on force, and a monopoly on violence, the monopoly on the death sentence.
Initiation of force, right?
It, it, it's it's
Yes.
over the state being the victim. It, most of the times these things are happening when there's no victim. The state determines arbitrarily that this is a crime. You're hurting the state because you bought a pack of cigarettes and now you're selling them out and making extra money by selling the cigarettes individually for more than you than what you paid for a pack or a carton or whatever. But now the state's not getting its tax dollars, so we're gonna take you out for that. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the only, in the vast majority of these cases, that's what this comes down to. Drugs. There's no victim in a drug in the consensual sales, exchange of commerce between me selling you a pound of whatever controlled substance it is, or an ounce, and you. There's no victim there. No harm is done. It's a consensual interaction. You can have a conversation about the legalization of recreational drug use. We can beat that dead horse all we want, but there's no victim, and
Either
this
way, there's no
other than the
victim.
state.
So this one, I'm going to put the link will be in the show notes on unsafespace.com whenever that shows up a few days after the show publishes, for somebody that wants to watch this. Or you can find it, just it's on YouTube, Google Eric Gardner's choking death. And trigger warning or caution, it's horrible. He's just standing there saying, "Leave me alone." And so
Yeah,
they
it's
choke him to
ugly.
death. And the last one I had here is this one,
Oh, you
Lawbreakers.
don't have to
This is
play
your
this one.
video.
People can go watch it. It's too long.
Yeah, no, just I wanted you to just you brought it up to me, so I just thought give
Yeah.
us the elevator pitch on what this was.
So back on January 21st of this year, I went to cover a Democrat town hall event that was being held at the University of Minnesota Rochester Heinz Center. And I had been asked by some conservative activists in the area to come down and document their protest, and then to go in with them and set up to stream the event. It was open to the public. It was a public invite. It was done at a public university. The four members, Democrat members of the House and the Senate, paid for the event out of their pockets. Now, whether that came out of campaign funds or whatnot, I don't know, but they did pay for it and rented the space. The protest was taking place outside prior to the start of the event. I went in to scope out the inside to see where I could set up to stream the event. Went back out. When I stepped back outside, campus security immediately approached the crowd of protesters and told them they needed to leave. They weren't allowed to be on the sidewalks at the university. I immediately interacted and was very, very not forceful in a physical sense, but very forceful um, verbally with campus security and told them, well, you don't have any grounds to trespass us. This is a public funded university. They're free to be here. They're free to protest. They're free to hold signs. They said they were going to go call the cops. I said, we'd love for you to call the cops, because I had kind of an expectation that the Rochester, Minnesota Police Department was not going to want to involve itself in this. So I continued to stream, and I was recording on a body cam and also streaming from my phone. And so I continued to stream and record on my body cam, told the crew I was going to go back inside to, make sure I was there at the start of the event, and then send somebody in if police showed up and it looked like it was going to get, ugly. Well, I looked around and I saw, while I was inside, was in there, no problems, had no negative interactions. It was a very, actually friendly reception from a couple of people. And I looked over and I saw a Rochester police officer scanning the room, and I could tell that he was looking for something or someone. And I saw him turn around and walk out. So I think he kind of came in expecting to see a problem, and he didn't see a problem, so he went to go back outside. And so I followed because I knew what was coming. And as soon as we got outside and he got up to the crew that was protesting, he said, "Look, you guys are allowed to go in, but you're not taking your signs." And I immediately interacted, and it got pretty ugly, actually. At one point, that same officer used force against me with a single hand check, and hit my shoulder, telling me that I wasn't allowed to go inside. And we even, there was a lot of back and forth throughout it. And so if people want to see it, I would, I would suggest that you guys go down and check out the description of the video here on Rumble or YouTube, wherever you're seeing this, and watch the video. And, there's probably going to be a perspective on the part of some people. You're going to be uncomfortable because it sounds like I'm being very, uh, verbally aggressive with the officers. I was, because that's the only way you can talk to them most of the time. And in the other part of this that people need to realize too is you have got to start to record all of your interactions with public servants, but especially the police. You have any interactions, you see any interactions, you need to record them, because if you don't record it, you have no protection at all, because they're trained how to write reports in a way to make all of their actions look justified. That's what they're trained to do, to justify every single action that they take. If you don't record, you have no chance. If there is a situation where you have to file a criminal complaint or a civil rights complaint without video, you won't win.
So your
And
advice would be, if you get pulled over for a traffic violation, would you start a recording?
yes,
Advice.
the second you see the cop pull up behind you, and there are plenty of dash cam options out there that are forward and rear facing that are not terribly expensive, that will record directly to your phone or onto a mini, uh, what
Memory
are they
device.
called?
Yeah,
A
me
little
memory
internal
card.
device.
Mhm.
Um, get in your car, just start recording, uh, because you need that protection these days. You have to.
Mhm. I
Uh,
wish I had one of something from 4 years ago where I got pulled over for ostensibly for a traffic violation.
I think we all say that. I wish I had. I wish I had.
Yeah,
So,
I went to court, and that didn't go well either. They're in
I see.
collusion, the judge.
Imagine that.
I won't
The
get into
police
this.
and the
I'll
court.
tell you some other time because I think you would be like shaking your head. It would take me 10 minutes. So I don't want to take the time. But yeah, when I think back on my interactions, I named the beach and the park one. That was a traffic violation where I went to court and the cop completely changed his story. He changed his story once. I'll just an overview of I was actually not pulled over. I just parked and the officer came up to me as I was going into a real estate office, dressed nice, was on a scooter. He comes up to me with his hand on his gun. and I and starts talking to me, and I just like I stepped back like 2 or 3 steps, and I looked at his hand on his gun. I looked him in the eye, I looked at his hand. I had to do that 4 times before he finally moved his hand away from his gun. And then when he did, I said to him, "I was not going to talk to you until you move your hand away from your gun." And that did not start the interaction very well. Um,
That's because you showed contempt of cop.
contempt of cop. But anyway, he charged me with something and wrote, wrote it up and came back. And I pointed out that I didn't do the thing that he charged me with. So he
But
went
you
back
had no
to his
proof.
No, I had no proof, but, um, I couldn't I think in the situation the first thing he tried, it was impossible for me to have done it. I could just take a picture of where I was. I couldn't have even violated the statute that he said. So he went back to his car and wrote me up for something different, and I looked at this one, and I wasn't sure about this one. It was pretty weird, and I had never heard of it. It was had to do with passing, um, but so then I went home and looked it up, and it turned out, no, I couldn't have done that one either. I wasn't even on the right side, and what I did,
Yeah.
nothing to do with this one. So I went to court. And when I went to court, I explained to the judge that I didn't do the thing that he said. So the judge and had the cop come up to the bench, and they had a little discussion, and they changed the charge to a third thing, which I didn't know what that was either. So I said, "What is that?" Before I plead guilty or not guilty, are you going to tell me what this is? I said to the judge, which pissed off the judge big time. So the judge tells me and the cop to go outside and talk. So we go out. The cop explains it to me, and I said, I didn't do this. I don't think I didn't do this. I don't even get this
Yeah.
one. And I went back in and I pleaded not guilty, and the judge found me guilty, and he sentenced me to 8 hours, 4 hours of driver education. So I asked, does that cover scooters? I was on a scooter. And he looks over at the secretary and she like shakes her head like, no, it's driver education on cars. So I said, I don't own a car. I didn't own a car. I only had a scooter. Um, so what am I going to learn? And the judge goes, bam, 8 hours driver education. Get out of here. Okay, there's my
Yet
interaction with taking
you
something to court.
you were charged because you showed, like, and I've said it before, it was a retaliatory charge, and it was retaliatory sentencing because you showed contempt of cop, and then you
Contempt
dared to
of
ask a
cop.
question in the courtroom.
I asked a
Uh,
question in the courtroom. Yeah. And
yeah,
I could see a lot of people looking at like going nodding their head, like
yeah,
listening to me. But
and
anyway,
that was
yeah,
the
so
other problem is
I had to pay
people were paying attention.
$200 and take 8 hours of class, which had provided no information relative to my situation at all. But anyway,
You
yeah,
know what
that's a side thing, but it's another interaction with the police.
what it
I
ultimately comes down to is that police no longer are public servants in their own minds. They just they'll tell you that they are. They'll emblazon it on their squad cars and on their clothing, protect and serve, but they're really not. They're not about protect and serve. They Any protecting and serving that they do is protecting the state and serving the state
Yeah.
by uh, taking punitive actions and measures against the people. And it I cannot recommend people enough that you read the book that I mentioned earlier, Rise of the Warrior Cop by
Yeah.
Radley Belko. But also just start looking at videos of police interactions, law enforcement interactions with citizens across the United States. There's a lot of First Amendment auditing channels out there. If you don't like those guys, just just look for a channel, like Audit the Audit or Lackluster. Those two channels in particular specialize in talking about everyday people who just have decided to start recording their non-consensual or even consensual interactions with police, who maybe aren't auditing types. They don't go out and walk around shooting video everywhere that they go just to see how they're going to be treated. What you will see is a massive shift in the attitudes of police today and how they interact with everyday citizens and even their approach. More often than not, there's no attempt at de-escalation. There's no attempt at um, understanding what's going on. They do not get it. They do not understand that more often than not they create their own conflicts. And I don't think that they care very often because, frankly, they're going to win every fight. They'll win every fight.
And they
That's what.
go into it with the military attitude, right?
Yeah.
They are
They.
warriors.
Yeah.
The picture I showed in the beginning with the battering ram for
Yep.
those that didn't notice, it's very common, and I see it in the cover of this book that TC mentioned. The guy's got olive drab gear on up top, and he has fatigues, like
Yeah.
jungle fatigues on, and a
Yep.
black helmet. I first popped that up and I found it, and I think, oh, I don't want to use this. I want to find one that's police. So I full screened it and zoomed in. I realized, oh, it is police.
That's right.
He's got a police badge on, and then you can barely read it, but it says police across his chest. And it's like that's a police uniform. Like
Yeah.
that's for fighting in the jungle. And he's obviously, looks like a nice suburb. Like it's a very nice door of
Right.
what looks like a decent house in a middle to upper class suburb. Like that's what he's bashing in. And he wears fatigues. Like that's the image. So anyway, here's the book here that it's available on Audible. I'll get it and listen to it.
Yeah, it's a great book. There are going to be parts of it that you might go, I don't know if I agree with his position on this, or I don't agree with the angle he's coming from, but he's making some good points. But it's a great book.
Yeah, I'll watch that one. So when people say back the blue, like all the stuff we've been talking about, that's what comes to my mind. My answer is
Yeah.
no, back the blue. And that offends a lot of, neocon normies, right? They get offended. The people that have the flag with the blue stripe on it. And I say, you're disgracing the flag. That's illegal under the flag etiquette laws, federal flag etiquette law. You can't deface the
Well,
flag.
people are going to want to pay attention to my channel at the end of the week because I got a treat coming up for that particular flag.
Okay, so, why don't you promote, entice them on the flag?
Yeah, I think on Friday night I'm going to do a live stream directly related to the back the blue flag. I'm probably going to end up on some hit lists.
Yeah, you streaming that on Rumble, I hope?
I wish I could stream on Rumble, but they want to charge me too much. So.
Oh.
But I'll record it on my body cam, and I'll upload it to Rumble.
Okay, you can
live stream
upload it
to YouTube.
So it's archive on Rumble.
It'll be archived on Rumble.
Oh,
as well,
that's fine. This is live stream on Rumble, but I don't know. I don't actually know how many people watch it
That's
live more than
that's
YouTube
because
now,
you
though.
guys have a massive platform and can do that.
It's
I'm
not
still
as
dinky.
Yeah, it's not as massive. Well, YouTube censored me for the first time. It censored Unsafe Space several times during the
Oh yeah,
Civics days.
multiple times.
But I did a show 3 weeks ago on called Kennedy Runs for President, and it was just a report of his announcement speech, which I went through and played some clips of and analyzed. I didn't promote
Yeah.
him. I even said that I'm not endorsing him as a candidate. I might not even vote at all for president, and I'm not going to vote for him. But anyway, all I did is report on it, and YouTube pulled the episode after 2 days or something. Had something like
What a shock.
150 views, but the Rumble one had 300-400 by that time.
Yeah,
So a lot of
that's a
people
nice.
switched to Rumble. I think a lot
Yeah,
of
I'm
our
getting a lot more
audience had switched
traction.
to Rumble.
I uh, I have a video out about the Clovis, California Police Department and the medical center out there, and comparing, um, kind of demonstrating fascism at that level, what fascism really looks like. And that I put that up on January 2nd and kind of forgot about it. And I checked it the other day, and it's almost to 4,000 views. So I mean, Rumble's getting some traction for me, but
That's great. So
I
yeah,
appreciate you
I'll
having
have
me
to
on
watch.
and
I'll have to
promoting
watch
my
this one. Sure. Go ahead.
and promoting, that video, and asking me my thoughts on this. And I tell people, don't just hear what I'm saying. Start to open your eyes and look around. Like we can provide stats. Statistics can be used by anybody, both on either side of an argument to make their point. The question isn't whether or not the statistics are there. The question is what's the truth behind the statistic? What's driving this? And uh, and when you listen to the conservatives out there today scream and holler about wanting to disband the FBI, which a few years ago, 10 years ago, the conservatives never would have said anything about disbanding the FBI. But conservatives are really bent out of shape about the FBI, especially the Trump bot types. They love the idea of taking down the FBI because in their eyes the FBI is the enemy.
Now that it went
But
after one of their guys.
but only after they went after theirs. If you think for a minute that doesn't bleed down into local law enforcement agencies, you're crazy. And so who do you think they're going to send to your house to take your guns from you? You think it's going to be the city council, the county commissioners,
The
social workers?
the
No,
thin
it's
blue
going to be the people
line.
that you back.
Yeah. The
It's going to
thin
be the
blue
majority.
line will be the line between you and your gun, between the people and liberty. That's how I
That's
define the thin blue line. That's the line between the people and the liberty.
that's
Because the job
precisely
of the
it.
police is to support, defend, and protect the government from the
That's
people.
right.
The police's job is to keep the people in line from, based on the whims and the rules of the politicians. That's what their job
Absolutely.
is. So yeah,
Well, hey,
people say back the blue. Nah.
I've taken up enough of your time, so
Okay.
and I'm in my undisclosed location, and I should get back to doing my
Yes.
undisclosed
Yes.
stuff.
No more questions. And yeah, I have the luxury of a green screen here, so my location is fairly well hidden by my Rebel Civics logo. So yes, give me one sentence on qualified immunity, and then I'll let you go.
It needs to be ended.
Okay.
Dangerous for the people.
All right. Thanks for joining.
No, thanks
I'm
for
going to
inviting
make
me.
a few comments and close it out. So yeah, we covered everything that I want, just about everything. I'm going to
Well,
talk
I
about
really
one more
appreciate it.
thing, which is the militia. I'm going to get into why the cops are not part of the militia, and then
I,
I'll end the show.
I look forward to hearing your comments. Thanks. Have a good
Okay.
day.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Yeah. Check out TC's show, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment on YouTube. And I'm looking forward to his episode Friday. He's going to cover what I just brought up, which is the thin blue line and the flag with they deface the U.S. flag with the thin blue line. Like, yep, people say back the blue. Like, nope, that ain't me. Um, and so anyway, what I wanted to just bring up the militia. So I have a quote here I was going to read. This is George Mason, who is the guy that wrote the Bill of Rights. He was key to the Virginia plan in the right in the Constitution. In his address to the Virginia Ratifying Convention on June 4th in 1788, so this is the discussion when Virginia legislature was considering ratifying the Constitution or not. They were discussing the militia when they, and this eventually led to the Second Amendment, which George Mason wrote. But he said, this is a quote, "I ask, who are the militia? They consist now of the whole people except a few public officers." End quote. So by definition, police are not part of the militia. They can't be part of the citizen militia. That's a conflict of interest. So the job, the people that defend the government when a militia has to defend itself from the government are the police. So an example of the militia versus the police, Lexington and Concord. So familiar with the history there, 1775 or 475, I believe, but don't quote me on the year. It was before the Declaration of Independence. General Gage sent basically the cops, the redcoats, who had the job of the cops at the time, to confiscate the gunpowder, basically the firearms. So that was a gun control attempt by the government. They sent the cops. The militia defended the people from the cops. So no, the cops are not part of the militia by definition. They're exactly the opposite of that. If things really go south and the militia needs to do something here, any police officer that is actually on the good side, arguably, since I know a few retired ones, I'll, for sake of argument, say there are some on the force now, even though you can't, I don't see how you can possibly uphold your oath to the Constitution of the state or the federal one and be a police officer. But if the government becomes too tyrannical and the militia has to do its fundamental purpose, which is to protect the people from the government, the first thing a police officer needs to do is quit his job. Otherwise, he's on the other side. He's on the defend the government side. Anyway, we got some good advice from TC. I'm going to listen to that book, The Rise of the Warrior Cop. That looks like a great book. And if you're accused of something, don't talk to the police. They'll trick you. Don't tell them anything. If you're involved in any kind of a situation where the police start asking you questions, you need a lawyer there. Don't tell them anything. And TC's advice about recording, that's a good one. I think I'm going to look into a dash cam. But what he's saying is, as soon as you see the siren in a traffic encounter, start recording. You need to know. You need evidence of what happens. Anyway, I don't black the blue. The thin blue line is the line between liberty and the people enforced by the government. The job of the police is to support and defend the government and keep the people in check. I'll mention one more book. We did it in book club, which is Ordinary Men. That's a story of the Hamburg police who were enlisted during World War II, Germany. They were the group that is covered in the book Ordinary Men, about how they got the police to murder Jews, round up and murder Jews, take them out into the field and shoot them and throw them in a hole. And it's a book about how you can get ordinary men, the cops. So don't ever think these people that have you say back the blue and come and take it. That makes me laugh. I see a bumper sticker on a truck. Florida, you see this occasionally. A "Don't tread on me," a "Come and take it" with an image of an AR-15, and then a back the blue and a American flag with the blue stripe. And I go, dude, who do you think this "come and take it"? You got the sticker of the guys who were the ones who were going to come and take it. And if the government tells the police to come and take your gun, guess what? Most of them are going to come and take your gun. That's easy to look around the world, easy to look around the United States and see examples of that. Unless you got, as TC brought up, a sheriff that is willing to stand up and a sheriff can legally stand up to the ATF or the state police. Sheriff is the highest law enforcement officer in the county. He answers to the people. Unfortunately, they're also funded by the county commission or the state, however, depending where you're at. Anyway, I'm just going to close by saying, nope, I do not back the blue. That's a on individual example case, and all my encounters since I moved to Florida 7 years ago with the police have been negative. I've never had a good one. So anyway, thanks for watching Unsafe Space. Today closes National Police Week. So thanks for watching, and thanks for joining. And yeah, follow us on Rumble. As I mentioned, YouTube is probably on the end. The first was Rebel Civics number 50. That was the first show that ever got censored, and all I did was talk about Robert Kennedy's announcement speech as a reporter. I didn't endorse him or even get much into vaccines or anything. Anyway, I got censored for community guidelines violations, for promoting misinformation that would cause egregious harm by promoting somehow, I think because I talked about Kennedy, who wrote a book, promoting information that will cause egregious harm. This is paraphrasing YouTube, about vaccines that are known to be safe and effective by local health authorities and the World Health Organization. That was the reason. So if you notice, Unsafe Space was suspended from YouTube for a week. We weren't allowed to stream. We got another mark against us, a bad mark. I asked Carter if he wanted me to protest it or if he was going to, and he said, don't bother. We're only promoting on Rumble now, and it's streaming on lots of other places, so they can't shut up that easy. I don't know if they would care about the police. Probably this one YouTube would like. They do promote everything to do with going up against the police. Defund the police is okay on YouTube, so maybe they'll have no problem with this episode. I don't know, but if you don't see us on YouTube, check out Rumble or DLive or Odyssey or Apple Podcasts or BitChute. Or Google Play or Stitcher. Anyway, thanks for watching Unsafe Space. I'll end this now, and we'll see you next week.
This production was made possible through the generous support of our members. To join our community, visit unsafespace.com. Unsafe Space is an online publication for individualists interested in subverting authoritarianism and ushering in the next Enlightenment. For biting analysis and nourishing composition, or to sign up for our weekly news brief, The Abstract, visit unsafespace.com. Thanks for joining us today.
Warning. This is an unsafe space. Dangerous ideas have been detected. The content of this production has not been authorized for distribution on Apple devices. The following co-conspirators are hereby uninvited to Klaus Schwab's Winter Solstice Party. Please be advised that CBS News has paused activity on Unsafe Space while it continues to assess security. Central bank digital currency is a safe and secure way to protect you from Sam Bankman-Fried. If you think about it, no one should be allowed to express opinions. But don't. Think about it, I mean. That's not your job. Thinking has been scientifically proven to be less efficient than compliance. Science, scientific, and scientifically are registered trademarks of the World Economic Forum. Unauthorized use is prohibited. Computer voice courtesy. Never mind, that last line is misinformation. Please disregard it and return to your safe space immediately. There will be cake.